people will sort of sue over everything. What I was trying to talk about is who would win.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean it wouldn't be a huge nuisance to deal with a lawsuit. But yeah, something like you said, dealing with reading scores, again, that's not a suspect class that has that same kind of history of discrimination as the use of race has in the use of things like gender in the United States. So that's not been specified as something by the Supreme Court. It would be totally useful. I leave it to you to determine whether it would achieve all the diversity goals that you wanted to. But no, that would absolutely be legal, and I think that using any kind of criteria, there's other things that people look at, like parental education levels or census data on poverty. Those are all things that you can look at as well, because again, they're not historically suspect classes.
Well, let me say a couple of things. One, there isn't a whole lot of choice by a lot of our teachers on where they're going to go. They go where they're assigned to teach, and they teach where the principal tells them to teach. And they can raise a ruckus, and they can do all kinds of things, but they don't have a lot of choice. They don't have to work for us either, so they have that choice. Shamrock Gardens is a school that my children went to when we moved here. It has had ups and downs through the years. A partial magnet finally has gotten it where it's doing much better than it was and getting neighborhood people back into the school. And I think that is one of the things that Rod was mentioning, the magnets and partial magnets. They are a possibility for us to use in a new way. To my knowledge, directly to your question, Miriam, I haven't seen any polling of teachers to know what they think about that, but maybe we do have surveys of teachers. I just don't remember that being one of the questions, but I'll double check it and see. Thanks for raising it.
The evidence is very, very clear that on all life course indicators, educational attainment, occupational attainment, income attainment, where you end up living, as in choosing to live, where you send your children to school, your involvement with the criminal justice system, and your health indicators are all positively related to going to diverse schools. And this is for all segments of the population. I'd like to turn your attention very briefly to various Supreme Court cases around affirmative action or immigration. Invariably, I shouldn't say invariably, since 2003 with the affirmative action in higher education case called Gruber v. Bollinger, that was in Michigan, the Chamber of Commerce and the military filed amicus briefs, front of the court briefs, in support of diverse higher education, and several, and also they also in some cases filed briefs in support of K-12 diversity. And they made the argument that we cannot have a successful economic engagement with our customers, our clients, in the United States and worldwide. We can't have a military that is ethnically and racially diverse unless we have a leadership corps that is as well. And so I would invite you to take a look at what the top leaders in business and in the military have to say on this question, because they don't have the same axe to grind that I have as a sociologist and as a parent. So take a look for yourself. And I thank you for that question. It was not a plan.
We have about 148,000 children in Charles Mecklenburg schools. I'm going to ask you the question about magnets. How many of you think that the magnet served 0 to 25,000 kids, or 25,000 to 50,000 kids? I'm just going to go that far. How many think that there are 0 to 25,000 magnets kids in our district? Okay, and how many think there are 25 to 50,000? Okay, Thank you. There are actually around 22,000 magnet kids. And this is why it's so important that we get this correct. That means that the 120,000 or more of the kids in our district are really going to the school that CMS says you must go to. And all the time I meet people who, they'll say, I have a child at X school, and I'll say, I hope it's going well, and they say, well, what option do I have? They don't know that there are magnets. They don't know that they can try to transfer or do something else. Now, there are maybe a couple of thousand kids who don't go to their home school. They've gotten a transfer or something to a non-magnet school for a variety of reasons. They go back for a whole lot of things through No Child Left Behind, as well as some other issues. But because the vast majority of our kids go where we assign them, we've got to guarantee that they're going to get an education as best we can do that as a board. So just wanted you all to know that fact. Since I've been on the board, we have tried to do some moving teachers around, but we have used a carrot rather than a stick. That is, we've tried to entice them. We did it originally through what was called the High School Challenge, which was to give bonuses to teachers if they would move to schools. We then met with a bunch of our teachers, and they said, we'll move if you'll move us as groups, and you'll give us, make sure that we have an absolutely first-class principal to work with. And even then, we didn't get very many taking us up on it. We did strategic staffing for a while, which gave bonuses to principals to go to schools that were... All I'm saying is that it was all by trying to lure them, get them to move on their own. We have not had superintendents who, at least since I've been on the board, who have been willing to say, I'm going to move teachers wherever I want them to be and just put them there literally. They have all said, I mean, and I was on the board when one superintendent said, look, if I've done everything possible to make sure that every school had the right teachers and I still needed to move some, would you, as a Board of Education, back me? And it was, and there was, this was long before, well, anyway, there were 3 or 4 board members who said, no, we will not back you to do that because we want teachers to choose as much as they can choose for that. I think this is part of what it is to be in the marketplace. Again, this is, we let people go where they want to go. We're afraid to move them. I don't know whether we'll have the next superintendent who will do more than this or not. We have steadfastly, as a board, maintained the superintendent's authority to move teachers whenever he or she felt it was appropriate. But it hadn't happened very much historically.
Apropos of this discussion. Number one, the U.S. military has a public school system for service people abroad. I believe in there. Research consistently shows that the race gap among the students who attend those schools is the narrowest in any public school system in America. The research is out there if you want to follow it. The social class gap is also the smallest of any. And part of that, and I could go on about why that is, part of it is if you mess up in school, your parents' commanding officer is informed. So you don't mess up. However, there are some other things that we can learn from them. Secondly, I failed to mention that there was a police chief brief in support of desegregated schools when in 2007 parents involved in community schools a suit that went to the Supreme Court. And that's what I need to say. And the third thing I want to say is very briefly, we're going to do this. We need to have educators as our allies. We cannot do what Mark Zuckerberg did in Newark, where he informed the teachers in Newark that he was giving $200 million to the district, and this is how we're going to change your schools. We need to have educators at the bottom up, from design through implementation. They have as much at stake as parents, and so I would encourage that kind of approach. think that this is where we need to work together and develop strategies. There are experts in this area. It's not my area of expertise. I think maybe our social work community has something to say about it.
Thank you, Barry, for the question. I do think that one of the things that are people like you all who do understand this, to talk to everybody you know. It's just grassroots work. It's just talking to one another. And it's telling your own story if you have one to tell. I went to school 1 block away from my house in elementary school. So it was a neighborhood school. We were all white with a few Native Americans. I grew up in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I went to junior high school in downtown Tulsa because my father worked there. And it began to be a little bit more mixed. I went to high school at Central High School in Tulsa, which was the only integrated high school in Tulsa. This was back in the 50s and 60s. That changed my life. I happened to play basketball as one of 2 white players on an all-black team. That changed my life. Because we were diverse, and we didn't know about socioeconomics so much. We didn't know we were poor, middle class, whatever. At least some of us didn't. But being with those other people made a huge difference in my life. For me to become the person I am today. You probably have a story to tell, and you can tell that story and help us get it out, that this does make a difference. And by the way, Trevor Fuller is here. You all know him from the County Commission. Glad to have you here with us today.
The historical measure used in a lot of places, like in Wayne County, is free and reduced price lunch, which has a number of issues in the way that it's sort of self-reported and things like that. I would advocate for, in order to have it be kind of most rationally related to the purpose that you're trying to get at, you want to look at things other than just that. So that should be one of a number of factors, in my opinion. You can look at census data, household income, when you're drawing the attendance zones. You can look at parental education status. Not that that's the same thing, but it's often a predictor of what your sort of future income will be. So I think it would be good to have not rely so much on just one measure like that, especially when you have a thing called, like, some places have community eligibility now, where the whole in Charlotte does, where the entire school can be eligible for free and reduced lunch. So that measure might be kind of on the outs in a lot of schools and might not work as well. So you may have to rely more on that census data. Maybe Dr. Mickelson has other measures.
An additional complication is that the Department of Agriculture, some bureaucrat, has deemed free and reduced lunch status information as private. And so we can no longer actually access it and link it. Now the school can do it for its own purposes, but as a researcher, we cannot, and I don't know if you can get that information and use it for making people assignment yet.
We can get it, but we have to go to the child nutrition system to get it. We don't have it directly any longer. And it sometimes takes a while to get anything that we want.
But the main thing is, it's a crummy measure of anything. It's not valid, and it's certainly not reliable. Amy Hahn Nelson got some data from the state, and essentially, we bus today roughly what we bus when we were operating under SWAN. If you are in favor of diversity, it's transportation. If you're opposed to diversity, it's busing. That I'm quoting you, bus counters. And so you're absolutely right. And my sense is that we need to engage people on that issue and essentially ask them to imagine what world their children are going to be operating in if they grow up in a silo and they're educated in a silo.
But they aren't coming to these.
We take it to them.
We take it to them.